Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Hubbard, shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting. And with me today is our president, Sandra Wiley. Sandra, thank you for being on this episode of the podcast.
Pleasure to be here. Glad to see you and hear you, Jon.
Absolutely. Now, Sandra, we're going to be talking about a topic you love, which is talent. And this episode should be released toward the beginning of 2023. So we thought it'd be a really good time just to take a quick look back at 2022 and some of the large trends around talent, and then actually hear some of your perspective on what should talent leaders be thinking about for 2023. So Sandra, as you think back on 2022, what were some of the biggest shifts in the area of talent you saw develop in firms?
I think there were really two, and I think they're connected together. The first one is it's a recovery from 2 years of trauma and major change in our world, not just in our profession, but in the world. And, we now understand that the repercussions of those 2 years are going to be felt for many years to come. So I think that was one of the things that I think happened in 2022 in the talent area. But I also think it sounds terrible, but I also tell you, I think it was the jumpstart for us to change a lot of things and make things really great going forward, if we look at it that way. The second thing is that because of that trauma and because of that change, the power that used to be in the hands of the employer to hire when they wanted to have raises the way they wanted to, all of that power has shifted to employees. And that means that salaries and bonuses have increased where we didn't think that they necessarily would be as high as they are today. Boundaries for employees and, quite frankly, for shareholders probably and owners have shifted, and they're more securely in place today. And I think flexibility is kind of the word of the year. You hear people talk about the word of the year. I think that is the word of the year for 2022 is flexibility. So all of those things kind of morphed together to create the situation that we're in right now as we go into 2023.
That's a great summary of 2022, Sandra. And I think it really, coming out of the previous 2 years, it really accelerated a lot of these questions in the area of talent. And some of the things you just highlighted are now, here to say. As you look to 2023, if you were in front of a group of talent leaders in firms, which you and I will be here in a few months, but what would your advice be to them in the areas of focus?
I think there's probably three that if you were really going to focus on three things and three things well, these are the three things I would tell people to focus on. The first and foremost would be new positions. And that doesn't mean just CPAs. I think we can always continue looking for good CPAs, but I think new positions in the firm and looking at the firm work in a different way so that we have new positions that do not require them to be a CPA. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is focus on expectations that you have for your team and their goal setting. I still don't think we're great at it. And I think the better we get, especially with this flexibility in place, with people working from all different kinds of places, for people wanting to excel more but work less hours. As we look at all of that, I think it's imperative that we get expectations and goal setting down to a science. And I think we have to do that well. And the third thing is new KPIs instead of just hourly goals. I think human resources or talent development professionals or leaders in the firm have got to start looking at new key performance indicators for our team members so that we can drive down the hours, get more flexibility in place, really have those boundaries shrink so that we don't have to be at work all the time. So I think all of that, those are the three things that if I were coaching talent people in this profession, those are the three I'd go after.
I think those are really good advice, Sandra. As I think about new positions, I was just having a conversation with the firm, recently, where they're challenging themselves to think, do we really need a CPA to do every step of the workflow of the tax process? Or are there steps that make sense to have someone with another area, of expertise be able to, be a really valuable part of that process? So maybe we can think differently about who we're going to be hiring, things of that sort. And then you talking about goal setting and expectations. I think that's something we hear a lot from teams and firms where teams want clear expectations, both individually and as, an organization. So I think you're spot on there. And in terms of new KPIs, you touched on what I think is the biggest topic, which is people just overworking, working way too much. And there's only so many Gene Fridays and, massage therapists you can bring in that really start to get people to say, you know what, maybe we need to evolve our business model to not be so reliant on us to really kind of really overwork for a good portion of the year. So those new KPIs for firms, I think, are great. Well, Sandra, this episode, we're going to keep it a little bit shorter. We just wanted to get a snapshot from you on kind of looking back in 2022 and looking forward in 2023. I'm sure if we wanted to, we could unpack each of those trends for, an hour each. But again, thank you so much. For those that really love these topics around talent, I mentioned Sandra and I were going to be together in front of a group of talent leaders here in a few months. We have a group called the Talent Circle, top talent leaders of, larger firms. And we would invite you to be a part of that if you are, interested to really getting plugged into a high performing group of other talent leaders. So what other firms are doing. So that's just an invite that will always be there, but we also want to make sure we mention that. If you also love this conversation that Sandra and I just had, we release new episodes every Tuesday morning of the podcast. We are changing things up next year where we are having various hosts. And so you're going to start to see some change in the programming a bit, which is really exciting, but we're going to stay on cadence of every Tuesday morning releasing a new episode. So thanks for listening and please subscribe. Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you, John. Everyone, have a great day.